Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show today. I am Zach Rogers, the founder of BrainyBallers, and I'm here today with Aiden Shahamid, the lead analyst over at IDP Center. I want to thank Aiden, first of all, because as soon as it was confirmed that we were going to do this 2025 mock draft startup, as soon as it was confirmed, it took all but 5 minutes until he had 10 people lined up ready to go. So I want to first off thank him and overall ask him how you doing today, Aiden?
I'm doing great, thank you for having me here as always. Yeah, super stoked about this draft. And part of that, it's also a shout out to our guys that participate in this draft. Great guys, great fantasy managers, super enthused to be here. And I think all the managers that are in this draft are super in tune with dynasty values and dynasty leagues and such. Most of them are in 5, 6, 7, 8 dynasty leagues. So we got a solid crew here and excited to jump into it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we'll jump right into it. The pick order. I want to give them a shout out too as well. They, like you said, they're very in tune with it and everything. I love talking with them about the chats that we had in there. And one of them actually guided me to talk to Kent Lee Platt, the RAS developer of the relative athletic score system. So I want to give a shout out to everybody there. It was such a great time talking to everybody. But there's the pick order to get started here. If you're on YouTube, you can look at this pick order if you want to reference it throughout all of these drafts. As far as the draft structure overall, we did a snake PPR 12-team Superflex. That's the overall draft structure. And then on the next slide here is the big board. If you want to reference this overall, or I'm sorry, we're going to go into the round by round breakdown here in a second. And we'll kind of pick and choose from there, kind of some key topics and fun things to pinpoint in there. So as far as round one, we'll dive right into it here. Round one started overall 101, Josh Allen, 102, Jayden Daniels, 103, Lamar Jackson, 104, Patrick Mahomes, 105, Jalen Hurts, 106, Jamar Chase, 107, Justin Jefferson, 108, Joe Burrow, 109, Justin Herbert, 110, Caleb Williams, and 111, Puka Nacua, and 112, CD Lamb. Do you have anything from this round that you would like to talk about, Aiden?
Yeah, I think we started off this draft with a fairly standard first 5 picks, give or take, with Josh Allen's JD5, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. Pretty solid start to a super flex draft. Pretty standard with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson thereafter, Joe Burrow. Around the 1.08, 1.09 is where I feel like there's that bit of that teardrop in the first round. I'm going from Joe Burrow to Justin Herbert and then Caleb Williams at the 1.08 to 110. And then finishing off that round with Puka Nacua and CD Lamb. I feel like that back half, especially from 1.08 to 1.09, and the picks thereafter, feels like there's that significant dynasty value drop off from an elite QB. And Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert's still great. So is Caleb Williams, Puka, and CD Lamb, etc. But they're just not quite on the same tier as that mid to early first round guys, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree completely with that, especially the teardrop there between Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. I'm kind of shocked that nobody, I'll touch more on this in round two. I'm kind of shocked that nobody reached for CJ Stroud here in round one. I think that he's been devalued a little bit too much, but overall, I think this went pretty standard. I'm happy to see Jayden Daniels, the rookie, up through 102 already. So yeah, I mean, this went pretty smooth, pretty standard. And then we can dive into round two here is next.
Yeah, just a quick note on that round one. Jayden Daniels going at the 1.2 spot, I think, is really fascinating because he is still a rookie and he's going ahead of like Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, who did just put up fantastic numbers this past season. So I do think that might be in terms of, well, I mean, we'll talk about this maybe in a future episode, but in terms of like team structure, he might be more of a win in the future pick, not so much as a win now pick, just because you do have the solid production from like a Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes that all went right after him. And he is young, of course, but I do expect somewhat of a sophomore slump for him going into next season. But
yeah, especially with Bo Nix, I can definitely see a sophomore slump in there. I think something's going to hit one of those two quarterbacks, or as far as a sophomore slump. But yeah, that was, like I said, that went pretty standard, I would say, for this year for that first round. If you want to dive into round two here.
Sounds good.
And round two, we got for the 201, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, then Marvin Harrison Jr., 204 CJ Stroud, 205 Jahmyr Gibbs, 206 Malik Neighbors, 207 Brock Bowers, 208 Brian Thomas Jr., 209 Jordan Love, and 210 Nico Collins, 211 Saquon Barkley, and 212 Drake London. I see CJ Stroud there, 204. I still think he can go, or I can see somebody reaching for him in the first round still. I think that just overall, I think we talk about the sophomore slump between Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix. I think it might be, I know he's not a sophomore, he'd be a junior this year, third year this year, but I can see him starting to really rise this year. He's been pretty average. I think he's averaging right around PPR 12 for both of his first 2 years. I can see him starting to really rise there. I don't think he cares much about wins and maybe fantasy points, but I think you'll start seeing more of that development taking place in year 3 for him.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I do think back of round 1 might be a little bit of a reach for him personally, because we do still have a lot of great quarterbacks on the board, and we'll see as we go into round 3. We still got Drake May, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, etc., all still on the board there. So I still feel like CJ Stroud, the 2.4 spot, is probably about appropriate for where he's at. Definitely a fall compared to last year when he was taking the top 5 picks of dynasty startups, but still feels like he should be going about that range. I definitely agree with you there. Interesting thing for me is just how high last year's wide receiver rookies are going in these drafts. Like we have Neighbors there at the 2.6, Brian Thomas at the 2.8, and we have other rookies here early in round 3 once we get to that point. So it's just very interesting to see just how good last year's rookie class of wide receivers are.
Yeah, definitely. And I actually did a little bit of an analytics approach on this between Brian Robinson and Malik Neighbors. Rookie yardage is actually a high correlation to future fantasy points. And I think Brian Thomas, I think he was in a 1,300 yard range, and I believe Malik was in the 1,200 yard range. And that's exactly what you want as far as a dynasty wide receiver asset. So I can totally understand them going this high, as my point. And as far as the CJ Stroud point, yeah, I can totally understand how this is like exactly where he probably should be going, maybe a little bit high, but I guess my point overall there is just that I won't hate on anybody reaching for him in round 1. And also Saquon Barkley there, 211. How do you feel about that one?
Oh, that's so I was actually talking to Wonderbeard, the guy that drafted Barkley, about this, and apparently Barkley's at like is the RB1 on various different sites, Fantasy Pros and such. I feel like this was still a bit early for Barkley. He's a 27-year-old going to 28-year-old running back off the top of my head. He's coming off a season with 400 touches. This sounds very familiar to what happened to Christian McCaffrey last year, coming off 400 touches, older running back. And we clearly saw what happened there with McCaffrey there. So yes, Barkley is elite, but he's also not exactly the pass catch and running back that Christian McCaffrey is. So I do have some hesitations there at the 2.11, just because that is a premier value pick here in dynasty startup drafts, and investing it in Saquon Barkley this early is probably what you have to pay to get him, just because the hype on him is so high right now. But in general, he's one that I'm fading in dynasty startups just because of that age, that workload that he's had in the past, and just maybe he keeps it up for another year, but I'm a little bit hesitant in terms of injury risk and as such.
I can understand that completely. I guess what I'm seeing is I can understand this too, because the Derrick Henrys of the league, I can see them. They're kind of transforming that league in a little bit. The old trend, as of the last couple of years, has been, running backs aren't as valued, especially long term. So I can see how Derrick Henry might be changing some points of views there and kind of turning the running backs of the league to a little bit of longer careers. I guess what I'm saying is I can see Derrick Henry allowing people to see how you can have longer careers in the running back. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I guess my only pushback against that point there is that Barkley does have a pretty solid injury history. Like we may have forgotten about already, but he does have a pretty solid injury history. Derrick Henry to me is just built completely different. He's just a different species of a man, But kind of to that point, kind of a comp, we have Jahmyr Gibbs here at the 2.5. I feel like he, at least in my opinion, comes in at a solid value there at that point, because I could easily see him having like an Alvin Kamara type season. Career. Because he does have that pass catching prowess, he has the efficiency, and he is being used with a similar workload as to Alvin Kamara has had obviously in the past. So I do see Gibbs kind of having that longer career, as you mentioned, and towards that late 20s, even early 30s going forward, and of course being highly efficient throughout.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. All right, I'm ready for round 3. See how this round went.
Sounds great.
I think you may have remembered my slip up in this round. I picked number 4. We'll get to that in a second. 301, Trey McBride. 302, AJ Brown. 303, Garrett Wilson. 304, Christian McCaffrey. I'll talk about that at 1 in a second. 305, Lad McConkey. 306, Drake May. 307, Devon Achane. 308, Bo Nix. 309, Breece Hall. 310, Kyler Murray. 311, Trevor Lawrence. 312, Chris Olave. Once again, I picked 304. This was an auto pick failure by me. I can't remember exactly what happened. I believe I had auto pick on, but my queue wasn't long enough for the first couple of rounds. I thought I would have more time to get to it, but I won't. I mean, I'll take the hate on this one. I won't. It was definitely a big slip up, but I can see somebody, reaching for him, hoping for one more big season out of him. I can see that happening. Will it happen? I don't think so, and I don't like this here myself. I would say more in I would start personally going after him maybe in like the 5th round. That's my personal opinion, but I can see somebody if they're reaching for him here for one more big season. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Part of the auto pick slip up there, and I think we had another one in Travis Etienne to start round 6, I think it was. But part of the auto draft slip up is just because the guys that we have in this draft are so on top of it. They were drafted super quickly, super efficient with their picks, and making good picks throughout, that the queue just wasn't long enough, quite barely there. But yeah, I agree. Christian McCaffrey for me would be a end of round 4, start of round 5-esque value. He is that pass catching type running back, so his workloads primarily, he does offer that high PPR ceiling and floor as well. But obviously the injury history is to be concerned. Kind of similar concerns as to Barkley. So end of round 4, start of round 5 is kind of where I'd be looking at Christian McCaffrey. And it depends on your team build, of course. And we could get into this in a future podcast. But like if you're looking for a win now team, you probably would like that Christian McCaffrey in that end of round 4, start of round 5 range. But if you're more of a win later, might want to look elsewhere. Again, I find it super interesting because at the end, towards the mid and end of this round 3, we do have like those Drake Mays, Bo Nixes, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrences. Those pretty solid QB2s, in my opinion, pretty solid upside as well. And it's super interesting for me compared to last year, because having done 8-9 startup drafts or mocks last year, we saw those QB2s cluster at the end of round 2, start of round 3. So now it seems like having had this great wide receiver rookie class last season kind of jumped that QB2 tier, pushing down the Drake Mays, Bo Nixes, Kylers, and Trevor Lawrences back to end of round 3-ish. So that's just a super interesting note in terms of like where these player values are falling, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for 310, Kyler Murray, I think that's a little bit risky for me. Round 3 on a quarterback who is getting a lot of criticism as far as not using his weapons there, especially Marvin Harrison. Again, he was a rookie, but I feel like that might be a little bit too risky for me. But I'm loving the Trevor Lawrence pick there, 311. He's your prototypical quarterback. I mean, he has that contract. I think he has another 2 or 3 years left on his contract. So that's a pick that I can, if I was in that position there, I would love that for whoever picked that there, 311.
Yeah, I think that was Logan. And I honestly completely agree 100%. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have his breakout season this upcoming year. He has Brian Thomas Jr. entering year 2, so should be further developed. He has, we'll have to see what happens with the rest of his receiving core in terms of like Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, if they return. But overall, very solid offense. He has Liam Cohen coming into Jacksonville. So coordinator upgrade / coaching upgrade, I believe. And I'm pretty high on him, on Trevor Lawrence going forward, because he does have that pedigree. He does have the raw skill. I just think that he might go a little bit under the radar because this past season he was a bit injury plagued and just things weren't quite right in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Did you see that interview with Liam Cohen? Duval. I don't know if you've seen it.
I
Everybody was
don't
making
think I
fun of him.
listened to it, but I did like visually see like the subtitles. I was like, huh, Liam Cohen's gonna be an interesting guy over there in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and everybody was saying he looks like I think it's. I never watched The Simpsons, but it was Timmy from The Simpsons. Just a funny little tidbit there, but yeah, that was a fun one. That's kind of like the Jets head coach there. His starting interview, kind of almost like a little bit of almost like a clown show almost there. But you remember that
I mean,
one or
that's
not?
New York, so
yeah. Yeah, right. That's right. Okay, I'm ready for round 4.
Sounds great.
All right, so for round 4, we got 401 Brock Purdy, 402 Roman Dunze, 403 Baker Mayfield, 404 Sam Laporta, 405 T Higgins, 406 Rashee Rice, 407 Kyron Williams, 408 Jackson Smith Najigba, 409 Josh Jacobs, 410 Jalen Waddle, 411 Jonathan Taylor, 412 Anthony Richardson. What do you think about Anthony Richardson here? Do you think he's going to continue dropping off?
That's a really tough one to say because he has such high upside but such a low floor. I do expect him to keep kind of falling off a little bit just because I don't know if we're going to truly see that upside until he becomes a better passer. I heard that he's working with some better QB coaches to work on his mechanics to get better at that. And it does seem like the Colts will likely give him another shot, another year to see what he can do. So he does belong in this round 4 range, in my opinion, just because of that. However, I do much prefer the QBs that went in this round in Brock Purdy, Mayfield, and even some that are going to come up in round 5 far more than him, just because, especially for a QB2 in this range, you kind of want a little bit more of a safer floor unless you're trying to add another third QB to your roster really quickly thereafter.
Yeah, I agree completely with that about Richardson. My big worry there is I seen he did work with he got that new quarterback coach. I believe was he a Tom Brady quarterback coach as well, I believe, or some big quarterback name. I can't remember who it was, but my big worry there though is his shoulder surgery. And he had the same exact surgery as Cam Newton right when he started to fall off. So that kind of worries me there. Is he fixable is my point there. 401 Brock Purdy. I love that one there. Kind of the similar to the Trevor Lawrence. I wouldn't say Brock Purdy is exactly prototypical. He's a little bit small on the height, but overall, though, I mean, he's already succeeded. He already has a past of success. So, I mean, in the 4th round, you're talking about that stability here in a dynasty asset. I do love that pick there. Jackson Smith and Najigba, another good pick here, I think. Long term, I think him and DK, there's already been talks of Jackson Smith and Najigba being the wide receiver 1 there in Seattle, not DK. I remember that being kind of a end of a season debate there. Who was wide receiver 1 in Seattle? And I think Jackson started to kind of turn some eyes there.
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree. And just circling back to Brock Purdy for a second, I do think he does provide like a little bit of that rushing upside, similar to Baker Mayfield, as well as passing upside there as well. We'll have to see what happens with weapons and such, but I 100% agree with that take. Great value there in round 4. And part of what I like there is like Joe getting it done here has Josh Allen, has Brock Purdy, and that pretty much cements his QB1 and QB2 spots. So he doesn't really have to worry about QB going forward for us to drop, maybe some upside guys, maybe some floor guys for bye weeks or injury concerns and such. But overall, he kind of like secures that position. And we'll probably talk about it in a future episode in terms of like team composition and such. But I really do love that start for Joe getting it done there.
Yeah, and that'll be a fun podcast. I like that idea of team composition. We've already kind of talked about that. So possibly a next podcast idea that we'll be going into. All right, so round 5. I'm ready for that slide here. Round 5, you have 501 Bucky Irving, 502 Jared Goff, 503 James Cook, 504 Brandon Ayuk, 505 Bryce Young, 506 George Pickens, 507 Tua Tagovailoa. I can't even say his last name. Tagovailoa. 508 Devontae Smith, 509 Zay Flowers, 510 Kenneth Walker, 511 Tyreek Hill 512, DJ Moore. Jared Goff there at 502. Kind of the same idea between Purdy and Trevor Lawrence. I think, or I'm sorry, as CJ Stroud there, I think he's kind of getting a lot of hate for his playoff appearance there. And you, as a Lions fan, might be able to attest to this. I don't agree with him dropping that much. I know he has to be above 30 now, but I think he can still be a heavy producer for at least 5 more years. So as far as the round that he goes in, I can see somebody reaching for him in round 3, not 2, but I can see somebody reaching for him in round 3. How do you feel about his long term?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like a lot of these QBs really got pushed down the board just because we are so excited about like talent at like wide receiver and running back. It kind of pushed these QBs down the board. But I think Jared Goff there at the 5.02 spot is a huge value. He obviously still has that upside, even this past season, putting up 40-point weeks, which is absolutely insane for someone that's your QB that you're picking up in round 5. Has a solid floor. I think a lot of people are going to fade him this offseason because of the coordinator change. But also remember that the Lions defense might also not take that step forward because the Lions defense have also lost Aaron Glenn. I think Goff is definitely the QB that they will have there, especially once they have to start paying out contracts to the Gibbs, to a lot of their rookies, or at least a lot of the players that are on rookie contracts. So I do expect Goff to be there throughout, continue to be a starter. He's not going to be the Patrick Mahomes or Jayden Daniels, and you're not going to win because of him. But usually, of course, there's a couple exceptions there in the playoffs and against, I think it was Houston earlier in the year. Usually you're not going to lose because of Goff, So I feel like he's a functional, professional NFL QB, not necessarily going to win you the week in terms of NFL sense, but has that solid floor. And as a result of that is a valuable fantasy asset, especially in that QB2 spot. I see those spike weeks.
Yeah, that's so true. He won't. Most of the weeks he won't lose you, or he won't lose your game. He's kind of the stability in your quarterback room. That's exactly how I view him too. Let's see what else is there. So we got Tyreek Hill. How do you feel about him possibly retiring or going to a different team here next year?
Honestly, it's going to depend a lot on landing zone. He's one that's going to start fading down my ranks for me. It just seems like he might follow like a Stephon Diggs-esque path if he changes teams again. For me, he's been the biggest value change in terms of dynasty startups last year to this year. Tyreek Hill there at the 5-11 is not a bad pick, especially if you're win now. But it's one in general. I tend to go younger with my dynasty startup teams. But in general, he's one that I'm going to be fading this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned going younger. Once I had that CMC auto pick failure, I kind of just went all in on this year as far as that. All right, so round 6. I'm ready for this round here.
Sounds awesome.
Round 6, Jameson Williams, 601, 602, Mike Evans, 603, Derrick Henry, 604, Michael Pittman, 605, Xavier Worthy, 606, Chase Brown, 607, Michael Penix, 608, Jordan Addison, 609, Terry McLaurin, 610, DK Metcalf, 611, Dak Prescott, and 612, Travis Etienne. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, if DK Metcalf, I wouldn't be shocked if he even goes a little bit higher than this. Once again, this is another value pick I can see. I know JSN might be kind of the water receiver one there, but round 6, I feel like that's great value for DK Metcalf. And let's see what else is there. I mean, so you have Dak Prescott, 6'11". That might be a little bit too risky for me, especially with, I know he's been getting a lot of hate, and I know I've been saying that a lot as far as some other quarterbacks getting a lot of hate and them being devalued because of that. But I can understand the Dak hate. I believe he's 33, 34 years old, getting a little bit too old with a little bit too much hate in my opinion there. So I don't think I would be touching him in round 6. But how do you feel about that one?
Yeah, I agree in large part. I do feel like Prescott might get pushed down a little bit too far as a result of the hate and just kind of like the media characterization of what's going on in Dallas there. Because we are just like 1 year removed from him having an amazing season, CeeDee Lamb having an amazing season last year or last season. So I do, if he continues to get pushed down the board, I will end up targeting him. However, at that value, I do agree with your sentiment there. I do feel like this round 6 here is starting to get to that kind of tier drop off where you're either going to get really old guys that might really pop off again for one more year, or they might just turn into nothings, you know. And the last of those wide receivers that are young wide receivers that are still solid, that have good production, and a history of production as well, instead of just being prospects here.
Yeah.
I love the Jameson Williams picks here. I got Xavier Worthy here in round 6. I'm super thrilled about it because we don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice, how long that suspension might be, or even when Rashee Rice comes back, who's really going to be the alpha wide receiver, if either of them. So here again, Xavier Worthy in round 6 compared to Rashee Rice, who went in round 4. I do prefer the value on Xavier Worthy, but maybe I'm a little bit biased myself there.
Yeah, no, I can understand that completely. I feel like this is a good value for a sky high potential, especially similar to that. I can see Chase Brown being a great, sleeper in this round. I believe towards the back end of this year, he really started to come on here and kind of prove a lot of the haters wrong. And I think, 2 years down the line, I can see him being a much higher pick as far as like round 3, round 2. I can start to see him ascending into those rounds even just next year, if he continues that production that he had last year late in the season. So
yeah, I definitely agree there. I think it's going to be a lot of these teams, especially a lot of these running backs. I am super curious to see what happens in the NFL draft because it's a very deep class. I can easily see them getting a complimentary back for Chase Brown, so they don't end up having to run out Khalil Herbert there at the end of the season, or maybe they even keep Zach Moss. We'll see how he does after injury and such. But I love these backfields. I'm super, super curious to see if they add someone in the draft. But if not, it's Chase Brown to the moon. I think he's a great running back. I think he's a great fit for the to the Bengals system, and that he's going to do great going forward.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Okay, so getting into round 7 now. 701, you have Jerry Jeudy. 702, Chuba Hubbard. 703, Jayden Reed. 704, Travis Kelce. 705, Jacoby Myers. And then you have J.J. McCarthy. Then you have Alvin Kamara. 708, Joe Mixon. 709, Josh Downs. 710, Isaiah Pacheco. 711, David Montgomery. And 712, Sam Darnold. That was quite the script being flipped on Sam Darnold. Halfway through the season, he was probably projected to be around 2 or 3 for next year. And then just those last couple, I think that last game overall, he comes down to the 7th round. So that's pretty fun to see where he landed here.
Yeah, especially with JJ McCarthy also going here in round 7. It's going to be very interesting to see who ends up starting for the Vikings, because I think whoever that is, once that's decided, will jump up the draft board just because of the Kevin O'Connell system has been very productive for QBs in the past, whether it's Sam Darnold this past season, Kirk Cousins the year before, and such. So if JJ McCarthy can elevate himself into being a starter position there for Minnesota, I can see him jumping up into round 2, maybe even 3, just because of that system and his environment with Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, great weapons there, great system there. So it's going to be super interesting. And if Sam Darnold returns, then Sam Darnold can easily make that jump back up. Maybe not round 2, but round 3, round 4 as well. But I do think he's going to end up being a starting QB somewhere in the league. So I do think that round 7 might even be a little bit of a value pick there for him.
Yeah, I agree. And Jacoby Myers too, 705. I feel like that's such a great value pick. We're talking about Jared Goff being a stable quarterback. Jacoby Myers has been one of the stable wide receivers that I've loved over the last couple of years. So 705 here, that's a great value for Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that he is going to slip a lot in dynasty startups just because he's a name that doesn't really get any buzz because, it's the Raiders. They have no QB. And speaking of QB, I feel like their QB situation can only get better going into next year rather than whatever the heck was going on there this past season,
Yeah, right.
So I feel like he does have some pretty solid upside. It's just a question of, will Brock Bowers truly elevate himself into being that 100% alpha, 15 targets a game guy? If he does, then I can see Myers maybe taking a slight step back, but still at the 7.5 spot, I feel like he's a pretty solid value there personally.
I can see that. And I can see Brock Bowers even helping him out. If he does ascend into that 15 target guy, that might, clear up some defensive, matchups for Jacoby Myers too. So I can see it going both ways there, but that's a very valid concern. That's kind of like the Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., that's kind of that debate there. Was Marvin Harrison going to take away targets from Trey McBride, or was it going to be the other way, or were they both going to, help each other out in that sense? But I think they both kind of, Marvin Harrison had a slightly underwhelming year, but especially for a rookie of his, caliber, I think they both worked pretty well in tandem. But yeah, as far as that concern there, I can see it going both ways. I can see them helping each other out there.
Yeah.
Especially if they get, somebody like Shador Sanders, they're a great quarterback who I'm loving this year.
Yep, I definitely agree. And I also think here at the end of round 7, we have some pretty solid running back values. Joe Mixon obviously produced pretty well this past season. He's a little older getting up there, but good for a win now team. Pacheco and David Montgomery here at the 7-10 and 7.11 spots are kind of the end of those solid running back tiers for me. Pacheco, I know, is going to be faded a lot just because of how he finished the season, but he's also just like a couple months removed from a broken leg and trying to come back and compete this season. And we often see guys not even for a full 9 months thereafter not being themselves again. So I'm not too worried about Pacheco. I'll probably end up buying a lot of him this off season, just because I do think he's going to recover and continue to be that guy for the Chiefs. And Montgomery, it feels like he's perpetually going under the radar just because Gibbs is so good in that backfield. But he gets that short yardage role. He does get the touchdowns. He's on a great offense. That offensive line will still be good. Yes, they lost their offensive coordinator in Detroit, but I still think Montgomery will still be a solid running back 2 for your team.
Yeah, talking about running back and that running back drop off, there's a sleeper running back who started to ascend last year that I'll touch on it as soon as we get to him. I believe it was round 10, but I can't wait to talk about him. But going into round 8, so for 801, you have Ramondre Stevenson, 802, Ricky Pearsall, 803, James Conner, and 804, Trey Benson. That's an interesting 1-2 hit right there. 805, Jalen Warren, 806, TJ Hawkinson, 807, Cortland Sutton, 808, Tyrone Tracy, 809, Khalil Shakur, 810, Kyle Pitts, 811, Brian Robinson, 812, Geno Smith. Once again, I love the 803 and 804. That's pretty interesting seeing that tandem right there. The old aging quarterback and the young up and comer who might take over that James Conner's spot there in Arizona. I can't wait to see that happen, but I don't know if that'll happen anytime soon. That James Conner is one of the ones that I was kind of referring there earlier when I was talking about Derrick Henry kind of changing the script on older running backs, lasting longer in the league. I believe James Conner is helping that case too. So I don't know if Trey Benson this year will, start to take over that role there in Arizona or not. But either way, I love the value pick here with Trey Benson. He's kind of my sleeper last year, and even though he didn't get that chance to really ascend into that RB1 role for Arizona, I think that's such a great spot to take him right here for great value for Trey Benson.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I also think it's interesting to see where Benson is here and where Brooks is, because it kind of highlights where Jonathan Brooks will be in round 10. We'll get to that when we hit to the round 10 range. But Ricky Pearsall here also in round 8 as a wide receiver really hasn't done much his rookie season to give us any sort of faith in him. Whereas he still holds that round 8 value, whereas Jonathan Brooks, who went ahead of Pearsall in many rookie drafts last season, falls to round 10. So it's just interesting to see how those running backs hold value compared to the wide receivers, even as the league this year seemingly has moved more towards a running back friendly system, or in terms of fantasy points.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's kind of where you're talking about Trey Benson versus Jonathan Brooks too. That's kind of where I had them too last year, was Trey Benson always being ahead of Jonathan Brooks. And I know a lot of people, they didn't care about Jonathan Brooks' injury going into the season, but I think overall people are starting to see how Trey Benson has a little bit more potential than Jonathan Brooks overall. You have Jonathan Brooks you have his draft capital that's helping him out, or that will help him out, but overall, long term, I think Trey Benson will have a much better career between those two running backs.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting take. I could agree with that, especially with Brooks going down with injury again. And I think it makes Chuba Hubbard, when he went earlier, Pretty solid value pick there in round 7. But here also in round 8, we also have Cortland Sutton. And it's going to be very interesting to see if he stays on the Broncos and or if they bring anyone else in. I think the Broncos might end up drafting a wideout, but if Sutton stays in Denver and remains that wide receiver 1, I think he could be a huge value by Bronc Index here that took him at the 8-6 spot. Yeah, I think it could be a great value here with Bo Nix entering his sophomore season as that alpha number 1 wide receiver target in round 8.
Yeah, I could see them taking a slot quarterback, especially after once you get past, the Ted McMillan in the draft, you really have just so much of slot wide receivers in this draft. So I could see them taking somebody to take away a lot of Cortland Sutton's targets, or once again, kind of helping him out by, taking the attention away from him. That'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. What are they? They're drafting right around the 20th spot, I believe.
Probably in that range, yeah. So they're definitely not getting Ted McMillan, but they might get maybe a Egbuka or someone like of that nature.
Yeah, Roberta, possibly even somewhere around
I think
there.
it's going to be a very interesting draft just because how deep in terms of the NFL draft in 2025 here, just because of how deep the running back class is. And kind of the lack of a really solid wide receiver core. So I feel like a lot of the running backs are going to get shifted up and down this board once draft season does come around. However, I also do think it's important, like talking about Trey Benson and James Conner, Jonathan Brooks, Chuba Hubbard, and such. It's important to not overreact to a team drafting a running back because like Kyron Williams got pushed down boards because people were like, Blake Corum's going to take away all his work. But I mean, we clearly saw how that worked out. Trey Benson, even this year, didn't overtake James Conner. Neither did Jonathan Brooks overtaking Chuba Hubbard. So maybe a lesson to be learned here is don't overreact to NFL teams drafting rookie running backs.
Exactly, or even free agent running backs. You have Brian Robinson there. They brought in Austin Eckler last year, and everybody was saying that Austin Eckler was going to be the RB1 there in Washington, and Brian Robinson was no longer going to exist essentially there. But Brian Robinson finished ahead of Eckler as far as fantasy leaderboards are concerned. So I mean, yeah, even free agent running backs there, you shouldn't be overreacting to any transactions in that sense. And I believe Austin Eckler, that may have been round 9, which we can go to here next. If not round 9, I believe that was in the next couple of rounds. So 901, I'll start from the top. You have 901 George Kittle, 902 Mark Andrews, 903 Chris Godwin, 904 Rashad White, 905 Jalen McMillan, 906 Keon Coleman, 907 Dalton Kincaid, 908 DeAndre Swift, 909 Najee Harris, 910 Tony Pollard, 911 Calvin Ridley, 912 Deebo Samuel. So I stand corrected on Austin Eckler. I believe he was after Brian Robinson, but he might have been the next round. I can't recall where exactly he went, but yeah, this is start to get into some of the sleepers. It's interesting seeing Keon Coleman going this low. Rashad White as well. Bucky Irvin kind of took over that spot last year. Rashad White, I think he has an efficiency issue overall, so I can understand that completely. Let's see what else is there.
Definitely. Yeah. I find it very interesting that we start to get those tight ends here in Kittle 9.1 spot. I think it's an immense value. Joe Gannon done really had a great pick there because he is like a top 3 QB for redraft purposes at least. He's a bit older, but still at the 9.1 spot, I feel like, especially for win now teams, amazing value. And yes, there's not even any tight end premium here, but even in PPR, he is that kind of solid target for the Niners and Brock Purdy there. So love that. We have Mark Andrews right behind him. And then interestingly, we have the three Bucks players, Godwin, White, and McMillan. I like McMillan's upside a lot. If I expect the Bucks to move on from at least one of their wideouts, so I think McMillan can take that step forward. But yeah, I think it's super interesting here.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also Najee Harris, I'm loving this value pick, or this as a value pick. The first season, once again, talked about it on the last podcast. That first season, he kind of came into the NFL with a great season. I believe he was like top 5 PPR. And then he kind of slowly descended from there. But as far as a round 9 pick with a great physical specimen and Najee Harris, I love this pick for 909 there.
Yeah, I think I just like a lot of these running backs as well because we have Lou here picking up DeAndre Swift at 9.8 spot. That Chicago offense should take a step forward, I do expect. with the coordinator change and Caleb Williams just being in year 2, hopefully taking that step forward. And he has been very efficient in that offensive environment as well with Ben Johnson in the past. He might be more of he's going to lose some touchdown work, some goal line work, probably, I do expect. However, in terms of pure efficiency and maybe some PPR catches, I think he's a great pick there at the 9-8 spot.
Yeah. And also, I'm interested to see how Mark Andrews does this year after that big drop in that last game there. It's going to be fun to see.
I think Andrews is another one I might be buying just because he's another year removed from that injury that he suffered. And I tend to buy into these players that had a kind of okay-ish year 1 after injury, but after year 2, I do expect them to be doing a lot better. Such as Chris Godwin this past season for redraft purposes. He was having a heck of a start to the season before he once again fell to injury, but this was his second year removed from his previous injury. So I tend to buy a lot into those players that are on their year 2 after a significant injury. Maybe they didn't produce as well in that year 1 right after it, but I feel like that helps depress their values a lot.
I agree. And Rachaad White also, he finished, I believe he was top 10 PPR last year. And then Bucky comes in this year, takes over the spot there. So I can understand if somebody's taking him here with the off chance that he gets traded, since Bucky's the RB1 there, or traded or released or something, goes to some other team and takes over the running back role there. So I can see this being a long-term play with Rachaad White.
Yeah, can definitely agree. Especially because his value is so depressed right now.
Right.
Ready for round 10?
Yes, I'm ready. All right. So round 10, 10:01, Zach Charbonnet, 10:02, Michael Wilson, 10:03, Jonathan Brooks. There he is. 10:04, Tank Dell, 10:05, J.K. Dobbins, 10:06, David Njoku, 10:07, Quentin Johnston, 10:08, Devontae Adams, 10:09, Tajay Spears, 10:10, Xavier Legette, 10:11, Rashad Bateman, and 10:12, Hollywood Brown. I'm loving the Zach Charbonnet pick here. You talk about him and Kenneth Walker going back and forth every time Kenneth Walker was out. Zach Charbonnet he didn't quite take over, but I mean he always showcased some of his talent there. So I'm loving this pick in round 10. You kind of just never know what the future of that Seattle backfield is going to look like. 10:04, Tank Dell, another great value pick here. As far as that Houston offense, once again, I'm loving that CJ Stroud pick. I'm loving his future potential. So that Tank Dell he's gonna profit off of the CJ Stroud long-term potential. 10:10, Xavier Legette. That was my big sleeper last year. He underperformed what I was hoping for this year, but I'm still loving this, especially in round 10.
Yeah, I think Legette was a great pick by infinite number there in that spot. However, another pick I do like in this round by Luke Index was David Njoku. Tight end position is obviously brutal. It's kind of rough, but we're in the round 10s. This is kind of spots where I think you should be looking into tight ends. And Njoku has been producing very, very well with any quarterback that's not named Deshaun Watson under center. And given that he re-ruptured his Achilles again, I do not think Deshaun Watson will be the starting QB for next season. So I do think Njoku's the right pick there.
Yeah, I love that too, especially right now we're getting reports of Tennessee liking Cam Ward 101, and I'm liking Shedeur Sanders more than Cam Ward. I want my Browns to take Shedeur Sanders. So if they do get Shedeur Sanders, I think David Njoku will profit heavily from that if they get Shedeur there.
I definitely agree. I could almost see Cleveland going after like a Sam Darnold type as well, just if their defense is built to compete now.
Right.
So maybe they don't go the rookie QB route just quite yet, but also they got to manage the cap space and such. So we'll see. But I can also see them bringing in a solid QB, and then they'll elevate both Njoku and Jerry Jeudy as those primary receiving options in Cleveland there.
I definitely can understand that too. They went to the playoffs with Joe Flacco, so I can see them trying to replicate that last year. So I can completely understand that. And especially if they can trade back there from the 102, get a vet quarterback, more assets to compete now, and then take somebody later in the first or anything like that, that'd be awesome. I would love that as a Browns fan.
Yep, definitely agree there. Okay, shall we look at round 11, sorry?
Yes, let's go with this. All right, so 11:01, Jawan Jennings, 11:02, Blake Corum, 1103 Tyler Kraft, 1104 Christian Kirk, 1105 Ben Sinat, 1106 Jonu Smith, 1107 Rico Dowdle, 1108 Cade Otten, 1109 Pat Fryermuth, 1110 Stefan Diggs, 1111 Andre Yoshivos, 1112 Aaron Jones. I had to practice that 1111 pick there to not get the name. And
You've been doing great with names so far.
right, that's good. I passed that test. Yeah, talking about tight ends, dynasty asset tight ends. Ben Sinnott here, 1105. I'm loving that. I mean, Zach Ertz, he kind of proved that he's not, washed this year. But I mean, if we're talking 2-3 years from now, I'm loving this pick for the 11th round in the startup for Ben Sinnott.
Yep.
Anything you want to highlight here?
I definitely agree. I like Tucker Kraft as well. His efficiency stats are off the charts. So great pick there by Brees Index. I do think if the Packers start to pass more next season, he could take a massive step forward in that offense, because he has definitely seems like he's taking over that tight end one role. Because last season we were still thinking like maybe it's Tucker Kraft, maybe it's Luke Musgrave. I think Kraft has definitely stepped forward into that spot there. And I think this is the kind of the range where Andre Yosivas is also a nice pick, in that where Higgins to move on from Cincinnati, and they draft someone, maybe the drafted wide receiver might take that step forward, might not, but either way, I think Yosifas will still have a decent role, especially in PPR, get some end zone targets and such, and still get some decent production for you, like kind of like in that wide receiver 3 spot or flex spot in your dynasty rosters.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think really any Cincinnati wide receiver who proves their keep there in that offense, I think they're a great dynasty asset long term. So yeah, for that 11-11 pick, I feel like that's great value there. I'm ready for the final round here.
Sounds good. And I think for our final round, we kind of made them in terms of like our sleepers, not necessarily someone that you would take in round 12, but more so who would your sleepers be for this round.
Yes. This is actually the round that I was mentioning there being a running back sleeper. So I'll start here at the top. 1201 Raheed Shaheed, 1202 Jatavian Sanders, 1203 Darnell Mooney, 1204 Romeo Doubs, 1205 Will Shipley, 1206 Isaac Guerendo. There's my sleeper right there. I'm loving that pick. 1207 Jordan Whittington, 1208 Jalen Coker, 1209 Tank Bigsby, 1210 Marvin Mims, 1211 Cedric Tillman, and 1212 Kendra Miller. 1206 and 1212. I'm loving those picks. I mean, Kendra Miller, every chance that he's got, he really hasn't, sparked any reason to believe in him long term. But I think he had one game last year where he took like a 8-yard run into the end zones. But if you watch that play, I mean, he got hit at the 7-yard line, and then the lineman carried him into the end zone. So, I mean, and that was like his big play of his career. So, I mean, if we're talking about him there, like I'm loving him as a prospect, but he hasn't shown me that he is the for sure guy there. But I'm still loving this pick for 1212 and 1206. Yeah, Isaac Guerendo. That's such great value for Isaac Guerendo there. I mean, we're talking about CMC kind of falling off, and who's going to be the guy there? Isaac Guerendo. He's already shown, unlike Kendra Miller, Isaac Guerendo has already shown that he, can be the guy there. So I'm loving that pick there for 1206. That's such a great value long term.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Luke definitely got a huge value for Isaac Guerendo. I think they're even talking about it when we're doing the draft, is Guerendo just got buried super far deep in this sleeper queue. And that's something to definitely keep your eyes on when you're doing startup drafts or otherwise. There's going to be a lot of these value picks that just get buried based on the ADP or however sleeper organizes their players. So definitely scroll down for quite a bit, scan through the names and see if anyone jumps out at you, such as a Guerendo. So great pick there by Luke. I love the pick of Coker here by Lou. Just because I think Adam Thielen is getting super old. I think he's like 34 last time I saw. I expect him to be moving on, or at least see then some more work to a younger player. And it seems like Coker kind of can fill that role. I know you like Leggett there, so maybe Leggett also steps up in Carolina. But I am pretty high on Bryce Young. I think he's really redeemed himself in the second half of the season. So I think Coker and Leggett are both solid sleeper prospects here towards the end of startup drafts. I also like Will Shipley personally, because I mean, we saw him break off that huge 77-yard run here in the playoffs. And as I mentioned earlier with Barkley's coming off 400 touches. I think Shipley can be a great handcuff running back for Barkley, especially because I think Gainwell's got to be a free agent after this season. So I love Shipley there personally.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, well, shit, that as soon as he broke off that big run, I knew he was going to send in these mock draft boards here. Yeah, so that was pretty fun, and I want to thank you again for putting this together, getting all the guys together, and all that stuff. Like I said, it was within 5 minutes from the being confirmed that you had 10 guys ready to go. So that was pretty awesome. I appreciate that, and yeah, this was fun. How about your Super Bowl pick here? Who's your Super Bowl champion for this year?
Gotta say, I think it's gonna be the Eagles for me. I do enjoy watching the Chiefs play, but I think the Eagles are just a far better team, both on paper and in practice. They have Barkley, Jalen Hurts. I don't know why he gets so much hate, but I think he can throw the ball, he can run the ball. They're very balanced offense. Their defense is super strong. I think the Chiefs are gonna I really think the Chiefs are going to struggle to run the ball against the Eagles, which is going to make them one-dimensional because Jalen Carter on the interior of the defensive line for the Eagles is just so dominant that I think Mahomes is going to be running for his life for a decent portion of the game. How about you?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it's the Eagles, but my brain is kind of telling me that the Chiefs are going to take this. I mean, it seems like all year long they've won, but it seems like they haven't been the team that they have been in the years past. So I don't know how they just keep winning. So it's kind of just like that. I think it's the Mahomes effect that I think may take place here. But I agree with you that I think the Eagles are the better team. But I mean, then you talk about the NFL possibly, being rigged and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But I'm hoping it's the Eagles. But my brain is just telling me that it's going to be the Chiefs once again. So we'll see. It's going to be a fun game, though, that's for sure. But I'm definitely hoping for the Eagles.
Yep. And I'm looking forward to watching that game here up shortly. So super excited. I love this draft. And I think a large part of our success with this draft is due to the managers that joined up immediately. They're super enthused. They love Dynasty. They love fantasy football content and stuff. So big shout out to them.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was fun talking to everybody. And I appreciate, everybody joining, everybody being a part of it, and including me as well. So it was a blast.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Well, until next time, like I said, next time we might have a team breakdown, a team kind of a chemistry kind of a deal, podcast. So it'll be fun. We'll be watching out for that. We'll be putting that together. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good week, everyone.